A standing ovation at the beginning. You know, I've been doing this almost 20 or a little more than 20 years, and I've never had that happen before. So thank you, Spokane, so much.
So one of the things a horseman does that's different than maybe what a cowboy does or so many other people do is they recognize that it's going to take some time, not days, not months, but even years to get this animal to the place that it's doing the things, even anticipating the things that you've trained it to do. When you're trying to go through things really quickly instead of building it up, you end up with an organization that isn't sustainable. And see, with a horse, you can't rush into it. You realize that you have to go slow and gentle. And we use both the reins of the spade bit and the bosel for a transition. See? And it's not much different than mentoring a young person or bringing up a new employee or getting your customers to understand how you go to market. You start gently, you move forward, you have a time where there's a transition, and then you bring them in to the maturity. Now think about that. If you took the time with your staff, with your customers, with your marketing efforts, with your vendors, can you imagine how loyal they would be to you? Can you imagine how they would want to perform? Can you imagine how well they'd understand your business? Can you imagine how well they know their job? The risks are not as dangerous as the threat. Your economy, lawsuits, changes in the market, and sometimes this thing that you've been riding and working and getting to a point where it is ready to do the very thing that you've trained it to do takes a misstep, rolls over on top of you, and then gives up. What are you going to do when that happens? See, when I was first coming up as a horseman, I trained under 2 Hall of Fame horsemen. And he showed me this one simple technique. And this simple key to communicating with a horse is this: make the wrong thing difficult and the right thing easy. Just simply showing them, this is what we want them to do. This is how we want our customers to act. This is how we want our customer service people to respond. And when they don't, you just keep applying pressure until they do. And when they do, you let the pressure off. If you took this one skill today and you took it home with you and you used it with your team, you used it with your customers, you used it with that angry person on the phone with you, it'll blow your mind how people respond. See, if you take a horse and you try to beat them into submission, they will win every time. If you try to force them to do things, and I'll tell you, some guys who call themselves horsemen will actually become draconian in the way they do things. They do every kind of crazy thing you can imagine, but what they have is not a willing subject, but a tortured victim. Do you want tortured victims as customers, as team members, as board members or stockholders?
Over what I call the red states, living in the red, those flyover states where people are just tired of the direction of the country that they love is going.
Yep.
And let me just give you an idea what I mean by that. I was talking to a gentleman on the airplane not long ago, and he was sitting next to me, and we got to talking about politics and worldview and those kinds of things. And he lived on the East Coast. By all intents and purposes, he was doing well. He had mentioned that he had gone to Princeton University. He was a man who was well thought. He thought through things. He was a gentleman. And he got to telling me what was wrong with the people in the flyover states, which I thought was kind of funny. So I decided I would listen a little bit. He had no idea who I was. And he started to tell me about, well, you know, I think that the people that are in the flyover states, they're just, you know, they're not very well educated. They really just don't understand how the world works. They don't really grasp how the economy is driven. And a little later in the conversation, now I don't want you to be offended, okay? Because what I'm about to say could offend you. Right? Thank you. I was going to say no snowflakes, right? And he said, but what I'm convinced is that the people in the red states are brainwashed. Well, you know what? You're going to say that next to me. I'm going to drill into that one a little bit to find out what exactly do you mean by brainwashed. He says, well, it's simple. These folks, all they have is AM radio. And we all know that AM radio is all kind of scratchy and there's just not very good, programming on it. And the truth is that they just are so backwards, it's almost hopeless. And if it wasn't for those of us on the coast to keep the Enlightenment going forward, yeah, God help us.